Hello and welcome to Culture Shocked, the pop culture podcast usually brought to you by three aging millennials and our outdated opinions. But today, you only get me, Corey, as I do a deep dive into some of the most vile, disgusting creatures to ever walk among us. Welcome to Corey's Killer Corner. Today, I am covering another waste of life. A vile creature who shouldn't have been able to get away with what he was doing for as long as he did. His name was David Parker Ray, A.K.A. the Toybox Killer. He was an American kidnapper, torturer, serial rapist, and suspected serial killer. That part is very important, and we will get into that throughout the story. But let's start this one near the end. On March 12, 1999, where 22-year-old Cynthia Virgil Jaramillo is running down the street, covered in blood and completely naked, except a metal choker collar covered in padlocks, seemingly running for her life, terrified, drugged up, and barely lucid. The drugs she was forced to take to make her more compliant to her captors made it completely impossible to tell how long it has been since she was kidnapped. She just needed to escape. She had stopped a couple cars who passed, but they would not let her in. She was tired and frightened and started to lose hope that she'd find help. That's when she came across a random trailer on the dirt road. She didn't know if it was safe, but she knew what she was running from had to be worse. So she burst into the trailer and startled the homeowners, but they could tell right away that she must be in trouble. She was beaten, bruised, entirely naked, and crying hysterically. She completely collapsed and passed out. That's when these people called the cops, and she was taken to the hospital. When she came to, she gave them a name: David Parker Ray. He was born November 6, 1939 in Belen, New Mexico. He and his sister, Peggy Pearl Ray, had a very rough and troubling childhood. Their severely alcoholic father was abusive and beat them and their mother every day. Eventually, their mother couldn't take it anymore, dropped them off at their grandparents', and disappeared. David and his sister lived with their grandparents, who were strict disciplinarians. Any misbehavior was met with very violent punishment. They would get random visits from their father. He would often even bring David extremely explicit pornography that depicted sadomasochistic imagery. He also was very unpopular in school. He was bullied and mentally beat down for being awkward around girls. It made him a bit of a shut-in, and it also made him turn to alcohol and other drugs very young. And while we're talking about his teen years, I should tell you now, this story gets extremely fucked up, and I am going to sporadically read transcripts pulled from the video he recorded and made girls watch once he had them in his toy box. It is not for the faint of heart or for the weak of stomach. I will also play a clip of this dirtbag at the end of the episode, so trigger warning for that. But one day, when he was about 14, his sister found his porno magazines, along with pictures of women tied up that he had drawn himself. It completely freaked her out, and she started to pull away from him. They never really bounced back from this, and not a lot is known of his sister after that day. It is unclear how early David Ray started sexually assaulting and torturing women, but in one section of his video, he does say, "I've been raping bitches ever since I was old enough to jerk off and tying little girls' hands behind their back." So it's heavily speculated that he may have started very early on, but it also could have just been a fantasy and a scare tactic for his future victims. Friends close to him reported later that he used to boast about kidnapping a girl at knife point, tying her to a tree, and torturing her to death in his teens, but again, never fully confirmed. After he finished high school, which this dipshit somehow did graduate, he went into the Army. It was a short-lived stretch in which he was honorably discharged as a general mechanic. He eventually moved home to a town in New Mexico called Elephant Butte and became a maintenance worker for the New Mexico Parks Department. He held this job for his entire adult life leading up to his arrest. He was married and divorced multiple times and had 2 children with a couple of those women, one of which, Glenda Ray, A.K.A. Jessie Ray, tried telling the police that her father was a bad person in 1986. She said she witnessed him binding and torturing a prostitute and watching her run for her life. They didn't really take her seriously, because the police. FBI agent Doug Belden recalls that Glenda literally told them, "My father is kidnapping and torturing women and selling them to buyers in Mexico." They questioned Ray about this, and he was even honest about his sexual fantasies and being huge in the bondage scene since he was young. But they had no victim to talk to, and no evidence that it went further than fantasies. So again, a complete mishandling of police work in one of these stories. That tends to be a theme throughout all of the worst cases in history. The unfortunate part of all this is that Jessie eventually fully embraced who her father was, and friends close to her say their relationship was extremely uncomfortable. They were sickeningly close. So much so that when Jessie gave birth to a child in 1990, everyone in their lives assumed it was David's, but they both denied this rumor. He used to stroll right down the road from his home to troll for his victims. He would pick up random hitchhikers, young women alone, and even prostitutes. This is where he met one of the other vile, disgusting creatures in this story, and the love of his life, I guess, Cindy Hendy. She was a fugitive from the law in Washington state and shared the same love for sick fetish fantasies of tying women up against their will. This is a part of the video where Ray informs these girls that they will also service Cindy sexually, and she will be assaulting them as well. They were a match made in the fiery pits of hell. We will learn more about Cindy soon. But this is where it gets especially hard to listen. Now, you may be wondering at this point why they call him the Toybox Killer. The combination of being an extremely skilled mechanic, brilliant inventor, and a sexual deviant made him more dangerous than most sexual predators. He had, beside his home, a semi-truck cargo trailer that he purchased. He hollowed out and soundproofed, and reinforced. He had a sign right as you walked in that read, "Satan's Den." He hung up various hand drawings of women in multiple positions being sexually assaulted by a man. He then put all of his torture equipment, a medical bed with stirrups, and pictures of news clippings all over the walls. He called this his toy box. You can look up pictures of the inside, and it's a lot. They established that he spent somewhere close to $100,000 when all was said and done. Ray sexually tortured and presumably killed these women using whips, chains, pulleys, straps, clamps, leg spreader bars, surgical blades, electric shock machines, and even saws. He even created a couple things for torture, like a fur-lined coffin that he would seal them in when he wasn't using them. He built his own pillory, a lockable device for your head and arms. He used pulleys and straps to keep them from escaping, and even mounted a mirror on the ceiling so they could watch themselves being tortured and sexually assaulted. He had a device that he built that forced them into the bent-over position so his house guests and even his fucking dogs could have a go. Yes, house guests and dogs. This fucking guy. He had a generator in there with multiple clamps and wires so he could electrocute various parts of the women's bodies. And he had a camera set up to film all of this. It's rumored that he filmed every session and sold them off to the dark web and his personal contacts in Mexico. He also had a checklist on the wall for the women to see of different things they will do to try and get loose. Like kick, bite, scream, threaten, scratch, yell, run, lie, offer money, beg, offer sex, or wait for opportunity. He also had beside that list a common list of excuses a woman might give to try and get sympathy. They said, "I'm menstruating, I'm pregnant, I have VD, I have AIDS, I'm sick, my kids are with the babysitter, or I have to work tomorrow." He would keep these girls for days or weeks or even months sometimes, depending on how much he liked them. Then at the end, he would drug them up full of barbiturates to induce amnesia and let a lot of them go free on the side of a random country road. A lot of these women wouldn't even remember anything and not be able to report what happened. They would just be missing gaps of days or weeks in their life. It was also heavily speculated that he may have actually been selling them into slavery in Mexico, like his daughter told them in the 80s. Mexico was only a short drive from where he lived and operated, so it's not too far-fetched in my opinion. He obviously isn't above that type of thing. This is what he said in the video about the process. "I get off on mind games. After we get completely through with you, you're going to be drugged up real heavy with a combination of sodium pentothal and phenobarbital. They are both hypnotic drugs that will make you extremely susceptible to hypnosis, auto-hypnosis, and hypnotic suggestion. You're going to be kept drugged for a couple of days while I play with your mind. By the time I get through brainwashing you, you're not even going to remember a fucking thing about our little adventure." This guy has problems, if you haven't been able to tell so far. It's heavily speculated that he tortured these women for many, many years with the help of many accomplices, including multiple women he dated. That all makes this even more fucked up. He would take about 4 to 5 girls per year and keep them until he was done. When all is said and done, it's speculated that he kidnapped, raped, and tortured up to 60 women over the years he was active. The FBI found hundreds and hundreds of tapes and pictures of his victims, but only one was identifiable because of a tattoo. She would end up being the nail in the coffin for David Parker Ray. This woman was named Kelly Van Cleve. Watching the news one day, she noticed her tattoo on the TV, asking if anybody with that tattoo could come forward, so she did. She had spent time in Butte and was missing 3 full days of her memories there, but after her supposed blackout, she was riddled with anxiety, depression, and nightmares that seemingly came from nowhere. Here's the kicker. During Cleve's time in Butte, she became good friends with Jessie Ray, David's daughter. After a very bad argument with her husband one night, Kelly met Jessie at a local bar to vent her frustrations. She had only 1 beer, but started to feel faint and queasy. Jessie offered to let her stay at her father's home to sleep it off. David met her at knife point, and Jessie and her father took her into the toy box. After 3 days, David took her home to her in-laws and said he found her walking around in a haze, essentially playing the hero. And they believed him, because she was known to go off the handle and go on benders like that. This was her husband's last straw with her. In his eyes, she went off for 3 days and is now lying about not remembering where she was. He divorced her, and she moved to Colorado. Over the years, she pieced together from dreams and therapy images of her being strapped to a table and suspended in midair and being sexually assaulted. But it wasn't fully real to her until the FBI showed her video evidence of what she thought were nightmares for years. It was all real. This is where we now meet Roy Yancey, a young, fresh out of the Navy man who moved to the neighboring town, Truth or Consequence, and quickly became friends with Jessie. As a child, he was known as a Satanist and ran with a crowd of Satanists who would sacrifice small animals and threaten the neighborhood with satanic symbols. They were in trouble with the police a lot back then. We all know a lot more about Satanists nowadays. That true Satanists aren't all deviants who run around and kill animals and smear blood on people. But in the 90s, it's what people thought. The satanic panic was in full effect back then. But I digress. When he met Jessie, it all came back to him. His dark side was free to be what it was, dark. She reintroduced him into Satanism, and it all went downhill from there. It's now believed that the word Satanism for Jesse and David was just a way to try to justify their desire for masochism and bondage. Jesse and Roy became friends with a man named Kenneth Lee, a flamboyant 43-year-old gay man from Florida who sold them drugs. They went back to him consistently. It's still unclear what happened, but the police were sent to investigate a foul smell coming from Lee's apartment in 1996. What they found was disturbing. They found his decomposing body in his living room, with blood everywhere, black candles, pentagrams drawn on the table, and they found a doorknob lodged in his rectum and bolts and nuts in the stomach lining of his body. This was ruled as a suicide. I'm going to let that sink in for a moment. I think part of that might still be the gay panic in the 90s as well. They just didn't want to investigate this. A year later, Roy found out that an old girlfriend of his, Marie Parker, was in financial trouble and living in a tent. So he used their past to lure her into a car, and at knife point, he helped Jesse take him to David to be introduced to the toy box. After 3 days with Marie, Jesse brought Roy into the toy box for the first time ever, and her and David explained to him that the news picked up on Marie's disappearance and they couldn't take any chances. They handed Roy a rope and told him, "You know what you have to do." He claims that Jesse held a gun to his head and David recorded as he strangled Marie to death. The video was never found and has been rumored to be one of the films that David sold onto the dark web. They wrapped her body up in a blanket and took her down to a ravine and buried her. Then Roy and Jesse moved away for a whole year to wait for the death to blow over. Eventually, when Roy took the police to the spot years later, the body was gone. Roy said David must have returned and moved the body. This was all from a confession that Roy eventually gave the police. Now is when we get to meet the one and only Cindy Hendy. After Roy and Jesse moved back to Butte, they started hitting the bars again. This is where they met Cindy. I know, guys, this story is getting too many characters, but I didn't write it. This is all real. Cindy started dating Roy and Jesse in a bit of a love triangle situation, using David's trailer as a hookup spot. David took a fancy to Cindy, and she decided to add David to the situation, now making it a love square, I suppose. I don't know what to call it. These people are all fucked up. No kink shaming. Love who you want. But seeing as who these people ended up being, fuck them. But as time went on, and it became clear that Cindy was just as fucked in the head as David, their relationship became stronger, and they became exclusive with just each other. How sweet, right? Wrong. Cindy told David that she needed to leave town for a few weeks, for a family thing and a wedding. He decided this was unacceptable to leave him without somebody to tie up and satisfy his urges. So he decided to test her and see if she was in fact what he hoped she was, the perfect partner in his sick lifestyle. He told her that she had to help him kidnap a woman for him to use while she was away. Not only did she accept, she did it so fast and enthusiastically that it seemed like she had been waiting for this request all along. After a couple of years of David and Cindy kidnapping, torturing, and sexually assaulting many women together, they went into Albuquerque, New Mexico, and got their last victim, Cynthia Virgil Jaramillo. After days of unspeakable sexual and mental abuse, David was at work, and Cynthia was inside the house chained to a bed, which I guess they started doing at some point, maybe to have women closer at all times for easier access. I don't really know. But while Cindy was in the kitchen making sandwiches, Cynthia noticed that Cindy left the keys just out of reach, but right there in her eyeline. She was able to quietly get herself and her chains over to the key and get herself unlocked and get to the phone. She quickly dialed 911, but before there was even one ring, Cindy appeared and smacked the phone out of her hand. They fought and wrestled around the living room, Cynthia just trying to escape with her life. After minutes of smacking and clawing and kicking, Cindy got a hold of an ice pick and stabbed Cynthia multiple times in the skull.
Yes, I'm calling for a young lady that ran into the house. She says she's just been raped. She's got her chain on her and everything. She someone right away. This lady's naked and everything else. She said they've been holding her for 3 days.
The police went to David's house the minute they had his address. There was no answer at the door, but they had more than enough probable cause to enter the house. That's where they found glass and blood and chains and straps everywhere. This was something this small New Mexico town was not used to. It was a very small town and there was very little crime. It was probably a shock to everyone who saw it. They went through the home and collected all the evidence they could, but they could not find the keys to the random white tractor trailer that was out back. They had to call a locksmith and get into the toy box. And when the first policeman entered, he could not believe what he saw. David Parker Ray's laboratory of pain and suffering. 3 officers who found the hundreds of tapes had to go back in and put one in the VCR that was in the toy box. They only got a few minutes in when they had to stop the tape and exit the trailer. One or more of them even vomited from what they had just witnessed. One sketch artist had to go into the toy box and spend days sketching everything she saw in there. Now there is a very heavy rumor that she flew home after this ordeal for R&R and committed suicide. But I'm not sure how true that one is. If it is true, that is crazy. That must have been some stuff to see in there. And you can see pictures. I wouldn't strongly suggest it if you have a weak stomach, but you can see pictures of what was in there, and it's a lot. They quickly found and arrested all 4 people involved in these horrible acts over the years. Roy Yancey, Jesse Ray, Cindy Hendy, and of course, David Parker Ray. Throughout all of the trials, Jessie never once turned on her father David, never gave the cops even an ounce of evidence, because she was just as fucked in the head. David himself maintained his innocence, told the police that every single woman who entered the toy box did so willingly. Cindy completely denied any knowledge of the acts even taking place. But once the evidence got too great and there was too much against her, she flipped a switch and tried to play the victim, claiming that David tricked her into his demented life of bondage and torture. She then gave a full confession to everything she witnessed, hoping that it would play into her innocent little victim storyline. In David's trial, they played the entire 45-minute audio tape of him explaining what he was going to do to the women. And he still afterwards said he was innocent, that it was all a game, that it was all scripted and everybody who went in there knew exactly what they were getting into. But when he learned exactly how much time his daughter was going to get in prison, around 90 years I believe, he decided to make a deal. He would confess to every single act and every single woman as long as they released his daughter immediately. And guys, even with all the evidence against David Parker Ray, there was still no bodies, so they took the deal. Jessie Ray walked free with only 5 years probation. To this day, she is out there somewhere, free of all charges. Roy Yancey pled guilty to 2 counts of murder and was released in 2011. He is still free to this day and even has an active social media presence. That's real nice. Cindy Hendy only served half of her sentence and was released in July 2019. She never showed any signs of remorse for what she did, only that she was also a victim of David Parker Ray. David himself never served 1 day of his sentence. He agreed to show the police where all the bodies were, but before they could even do any of that, he had a heart attack and died in prison. This piece of shit got over 220 years in prison and died the first night, peacefully. I can't even tell you how angry that makes me. Still to this day, nobody knows how many women he assaulted and or killed. The police searched the lakes for years and never came up with a single body. And even though they saw more than one murder on tape, none of these women could even be identified, not one of them. So there was nothing to hold against David Parker Ray. This plea deal that he got for his daughter's release was the only reason that man even got sentenced. And he got his daughter out and then died peacefully. I can't believe the way this one turned out, and it makes me angry. This was a hard one to get through, I know. But if you made it this far, I appreciate you sticking with me to hate this worthless pile of trash as much as I do. I'm going to play a small clip of the tape he made his victims listen to. If that's too much for you, I understand. Either way, thanks for listening, and don't forget to be better than David Parker Ray.
Are you comfortable right now? I doubt it. Wrists and ankles chained, gagged, probably blindfolded. You are disoriented and scared too, I would imagine. You are obviously here against your will. Totally helpless. You've been snatched and brought here for us to train and use as a sex slave. You sound kind of far out. Well, I suppose it is to the uninitiated, but we do it all the time. Hello there, bitch. I'm going to tell you in detail why you have been kidnapped, what's going to happen to you. You are obviously here against your will. You're going to be kept chained in a variety of different positions, usually with your legs or knees forced wide apart. You will be raped thoroughly and repeatedly in every hole you've got. You're going to be drugged up real heavy with a combination of sodium pentothal and phenobarbital. You're not going to remember a thing about this little adventure or what has happened to you.